This fitness influencer has been arrested and charged in an alleged case of domestic violence. Stefi Cohen is a powerhouse in the gym. She puts up massive weight. On Instagram, she has more than 1 million followers. The most recent case she's now dealing with is on top of a revenge porn scandal that she's accused of running dating back to last year. Let's break it down. We're on the case presented by Law&Crime. I'm Stewart. Today we're following an update on a case out of South Florida that includes allegations of revenge porn. Here's the person at the center of that case. Her name is Stefi Cohen. She's a 25-time world record holder in powerlifting. She's a pro boxer, and she's a doctor in physical therapy, according to her Instagram. Here's proof of her powerlifting skill. This is a video that she posted on X of her deadlift, and I don't have to tell you, that is some serious weight. Police say on July 1st, she was arrested on a charge of domestic violence battery in Miami. This is her mugshot from the Miami-Dade County Jail. According to court documents that we saw, Cohen was arrested after an alleged dispute with her boyfriend. And that boyfriend, according to these court documents, told prosecutors he wanted this case against Cohen dismissed. But TMZ has more court documents that shed light on what police say allegedly happened. This was a dispute related to an argument about their relationship, TMZ says, and the alleged victim noticed that Cohen was allegedly recording the conversation with her computer. The two then got into a physical altercation, and Cohen allegedly scratched her boyfriend on his neck and chest. She allegedly claimed that she too was hit by her boyfriend, but police say there was no proof of that. This case against Cohen comes a little more than a year after allegations of revenge porn.
It says computer offenses, then it's sexual, cyber harassment, criminal mischief, resisting an officer without violence.
This is video per WTVJ in Miami of Cohen making a court appearance in May of last year. In that case, which is still ongoing, Cohen is accused of stealing and spreading nude pictures of an ex-boyfriend's girlfriend. According to police, Cohen gained access to her ex's laptop because it was left behind in a house that they used to live in together. But on top of that, police say she got into her ex's iCloud account by guessing his password. Eventually she got it and she got in. And when she got into the iCloud account, she found sexually explicit pictures of her ex's new girlfriend, according to police. She then allegedly downloaded those pictures and spread them to a group chat of people, quote, with the purpose of exposing and humiliating her. Cohen is a pro boxer. She has a record of 4 wins, 1 loss, and a draw. She has also competed in mixed martial arts. Police write that they approached Cohen while she was walking on the street near her house as they were going to make an arrest. And when officers tried to arrest her, she started walking away quickly. This is where police found out why she has a winning record, apparently, in boxing. After being told that she was under arrest, police write that Cohen began to, quote, physically resist. She tensed up her arms and attempted to put them in front of her to prevent Officer Sevilla from placing her in handcuffs. Before we get back to this episode of On the Case, I want to bring you a Law&Crime legal alert. Did you know that children under the age of 21 are being diagnosed with serious conditions like type 2 diabetes and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and research is potentially linking ultra-processed foods to these outcomes? Our partners at Morgan & Morgan are stepping in to fight to hold food companies accountable. They have decades of experience fighting large corporations, and they're ready to stand up for families who deserve justice. So if your child under 21 has been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes or non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, go to www.forthepeople.com/food. You can also scan this QR code on your screen or click the link below. Eventually, with the help of another officer, they were able to get Cohen in handcuffs. But then Cohen, with her right leg, according to police, hooked Officer Sevilla's right leg and attempted to sweep him off his feet. Police say then Cohen was put in the back of a police cruiser, but she allegedly wasn't done. Cohen, quote, placed her right leg on the latch to unlock the door and grabbed it with her toes. Miss Cohen pulled the latch with her toes and intentionally broke the locking system, causing the door not to lock at all. Now, in the wake of her battery arrest this month, court records show that Cohen's bond has been moved to a pretrial monitoring program. Her next court appearance is set on July 24th in the case involving the revenge porn. The battery case has a July 23rd court date scheduled. Joining us now to talk about this case is Randy Kessler, family law attorney and trial attorney. Thank you for taking the time to be with us on Law and Crime. There's a lot to unpack in this case involving this fitness influencer, but let's start with the most recent legal issues that she's facing, allegedly getting into this altercation with her boyfriend, and he has a scratch on his body, and that was enough for police apparently to say that this reportedly, per TMZ, was enough to charge her with battery. In your experience, how do these cases typically work when there's this he said, she said, one person has more injuries than another when it comes to who gets charged?
So there are two types of trials, right? Two types of law. There's civil and criminal. So what we see a lot of times is the lower burden case, a temporary protective order, where if someone's really afraid for their own safety, they take out a civil protective order where it's really not hard to get a judge to sign something saying, for safety's sake, keep them away from me. That just keeps them away from each other. This is a criminal case. So the police obviously thought there was enough there that they had probable cause to arrest her and to put her away and to make her make bond. And there's going to be a trial about whether or not she committed a crime. So it's not just about keeping her away from him. This case is about punishing her for committing a violent act, a crime of battery.
And in those cases, because according to court records, her boyfriend, who's the alleged victim in the battery case, apparently told prosecutors, like, let's just dismiss it, doesn't want to press charges. When you see these cases, I mean, how far does that go? Because as much as, we've also seen domestic violence cases where the victim is someone who's hesitant to go forward. How effective is law enforcement at figuring these types of cases out and what to do?
So it's a great question, Chris, and it's a tough, difficult dilemma for law enforcement, right? Law enforcement, they don't technically represent the victim. They're worried about the victim. They're concerned about the victim. They represent the state. They've got a duty to enforce the law. And so a law was broken, they need to enforce it. Now, if the victim is not going to testify and is really going to make it hard for the prosecutors to win the case, they may have to drop the case. But just a victim who says, I don't really want to go forward. Well, what if you're the prosecutor and you listen to the victim and you don't go forward, and then this person does it to somebody else, then are you responsible as a prosecutor? Could you have prevented this? If a crime was broken, if a crime was committed, if a law was broken, then they've got a duty to prosecute. There may be a plea. They may agree to negotiate it down a little bit lower because the victim's not that upset. Or sometimes you have victims that really want, vengeance, and the prosecutor has to really go all out and get the maximum sentence if they can. So it's not as simple as, hey, the victim says, I don't want to prosecute anymore, so the prosecutor just does what the victim wants. They've got to think about, they represent society, they represent the state, a crime was committed. Can they just say, well, if it doesn't bother you, it doesn't bother me? It's not really their job. So they've got a dilemma. They can drop it. But really the analysis should be, can we prove this case? Is it a winnable case? And if not, then we plead it down or we dismiss it.
I look at Stefi Cohen. I mean, clearly she has, physically she's in the top 1%. I'll never put up the numbers that she does in the gym. She's also a professional boxer, and she's 4-1-1 on the record. So she's very talented athletically. How can that, in cases you've seen, how can that factor into how police may view it, how prosecutors may view it, than a domestic violence case where we see sometimes the man more physically? I'm trying to find the right way to phrase it, but clearly, I mean, she's someone who is into combat sports. How does that factor into how police look at it?
Yeah, she's a force to be reckoned with. Well,
right.
Again, it can cut both ways. On one side, of course, do they really want to ruin her career? Are they the ones ruining her career? If she gets arrested and convicted, does that hurt her ability to pursue an income? So that's one side of it. But the bigger side is, yes, we all watch TV shows where boxers say, these are licensed weapons, and and sometimes there's a higher duty to be careful, and that's sort of, with a lot of power comes a lot of responsibility. It's funny, I got to know Evander Holyfield very well because we've had some work together and we've become friendly. And he once told me, Mr. Kessler, I don't hit anybody for free. So, that people that are in that business, they know what they have and they've got to be careful, and they know there's going to be a higher burden. If you go in front of a jury, I can't imagine a jury saying, oh, well, she didn't know how strong she was, or she didn't. I mean, she knows that she could hurt somebody, and she's got to be extra careful when you're in that environment. If you've got that power and that strength, then you've got to use it appropriately. I think that's a hard burden for her if she's the defendant in a trial.
Well, and she also is facing several charges related to this so-called revenge porn case that she's been accused of. Before we dive into that, because now you have this battery case where someone ends up, according to police, getting a scratch of some kind on their body, and then you have this other case where she also gave police, it seemed, all that they could handle when they were trying to arrest her. Are those two typically isolated instances, or if you're the attorney prosecuting the case related to the revenge porn, that you can point as somewhat of a character definition of someone and be like, look, this is what happened just a year later?
So that's a tough one, right? The law is similar transactions. If somebody has a pattern of behavior and they've done the same thing 5 times, the judge is probably going to let the prosecutor talk about it because maybe that makes them more likely to have done it this time. Is this a similar transaction? Well, maybe it's similarly motivated. Maybe she was angry at both of these guys because they both did something wrong to her. Maybe she reacted in a similar way. It's going to be a fact-based decision. But if you're the prosecutor, you want to get it in. You want the jury not to like her and to say she's got anger issues. She reacts, out of bounds and does stuff that she shouldn't do. And if you're the defense, you're going to say, that's another case with a whole separate set of circumstances. It's a relationship issue. This is not a relationship issue. She didn't do anything wrong. She was defending herself. But yes, they're going to try to get it in if they're the prosecutors.
And when you look at trials, how much of that is going to be determined whether or not it can actually be said to a judge before a trial would take place?
Well, that's going to be argued before the judge, and that might be what determines whether a trial takes place. The judge may decide ahead of time, I'm not going to let that evidence in. We file motions in limine to keep stuff out. And if the judge decides that's coming in, well, now maybe the defense pleads guilty to a little bit more than they would have pled guilty to. Or if the judge says that's not coming in, then the defense is empowered and wants to go to trial, and maybe the prosecution drops their offer of sentencing or whatever the crime that they want to get the victim or the defendant, to plead to. Yes, before trial, these decisions clean up trial. It also gets a lot of stuff out of the way. When you know what the judge is going to do, you can predict the outcome, and everyone should resolve cases themselves. If you know you're going to be convicted, you take the plea, you do the lowest sentence that you can get offered by the prosecution. And if you think there's a good chance you're not going to be convicted, you go to trial. But you need to know what the judge is going to do ahead of time. Judges are more than often likely to help you ahead of time because they may get to avoid having a whole trial take up their time.
And when you look at this revenge porn case that she's accused of, so she was with a boyfriend who we don't know his identity. They move out. There's a laptop left behind that Stefi Cohen allegedly gets access to. And then she guesses, according to police, passwords to the iCloud. This story is a great reminder to everybody to update your passwords, whether or not this is true or not. But does the common spelling or whatever it is, ideas of what the password's going to be, she gains access to the iCloud, then takes pictures that police say were nude photographs of her ex-boyfriend's current girlfriend, shares that with other people. How does the law typically apply to the case, that specific case that we're talking about?
Well, there's a whole bunch of laws implicated, and every state is different. But number one, you can't break into someone's computer. Even if you guess their password, we have this thing called a reasonable expectation of privacy, and that's the phrase that governs in most states. That guy had a reasonable expectation that no one was going to crack his code. Although if you put 11111 as a password, maybe he didn't have a reasonable expectation. So there's something to what you said about change your password and make it complicated and complex. But so number one, she might have eavesdropped or she might have wiretapped or violated some statute by breaking into his computer, even if she guessed the password correctly, as long as it wasn't something he gave her or thought she should know. Number two, then distributing porn on the internet, that's pornography. That's, if it's across state lines, if she charged people for it, there are a whole bunch of crimes that she probably committed and that she's going to have to reckon with. I don't know all the facts. We don't know all the facts. We don't know what she distributed, who she distributed it to, when did she take it down. But even if you have a good reason to share this stuff because you're angry, doesn't justify committing a crime, doesn't justify spreading internet porn. There are big crimes and big sentences for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and one thing I found surprising is certainly, I understand why it's a crime, but it's not like she put the pictures on a public Instagram page or on Twitter. They were shared in a group chat that apparently someone then passed along that these pictures were being shared. How how does, when you look at trials and how these play out, and from what we know about these laws related to the internet, is there any difference between it being sent to a group chat or put on a public forum, let's just say like a Facebook page?
Well, certainly there's a technical difference, and the viewers are a lot more limited. But I don't think the public cares, and I don't think the judge cares. You send it to one person, you might as well send it to the whole world. It's like if someone says, "Chris, will you keep a secret?" and then you tell me, "Randy, I only told one person." Well, now that person might tell 100 other people. Once you violate that initial sharing, once she shares it with people that shouldn't have it, I don't think it matters whether she shares it with one person, 20 people, or 100,000 people. Once the cat's out of the bag, the cat's out of the bag. And I think that's the way it's going to be looked at. You share it on a group chat, what's the next argument going to be? Well, Facebook isn't as big as Snapchat is now, and Snapchat's old and outdated, but I didn't do it on TikTok. I mean, it's like a level of harm. Once it's out there, it's out there. She committed whatever the crime is. She technically violated the non-sharing aspects of the statute. And if she did do that, then that's probably what she's going to be convicted of, whether it was a group chat or social media.
And for you, I mean, your career, your practice has been in family law, and you often deal with divorces, and not every divorce obviously has elements of domestic violence to it. But in some of the cases that do, I mean, when you look at this story, what are some of the, I guess, red flags that stand out to you in the allegations that this woman is facing? Because it's often, or I should say that there's a stigma often that it is not the female in the relationship that is responsible for the domestic violence, but we certainly see it a lot.
It's the human. Well, in both cases, right? In the revenge porn case, and in the violence case, it's reaction. I mean, people talk about criminal lawyers being in a dangerous field because they represent criminals. Well, family lawyers represent people whose lives change like that. One moment you're in this happy, loving relationship. The next moment you find out that your spouse or your partner is seeing somebody else and rejecting you. Or one moment you find out that you're not going to get to see your kids every weekend, and you're not going to get to go to their sports events. Life changes, and where it really hits home is in family law. And these relationship issues, we see all sorts of reactions. So the violence doesn't surprise me anymore, unfortunately. The, sharing of, the picture of your spouses or your boyfriend's, girlfriend's nude photos doesn't shock me anymore. People are trying to lash out. If people would just measure twice and think once, we'd be a lot better off. The day someone files for divorce is a very dangerous day. That's when the spouse realizes, you're doing what? You don't want to be with me anymore? You're taking my kids from me? I mean, all these thoughts go into your mind, and your imagination can be a terrible thing. How is your life going to be? You thought things were okay, and all of a sudden your whole life is different than you thought it was. And yes, to specifically answer your question, woman, man, it doesn't matter. I mean, people can be violent, people can be angry. And I helped a woman, I wrote a foreword for a book of hers, and part of the title was "A Scratch Can Land You in Jail." You're fighting, two sides fight, and a scratch can be more deadly sometimes than a slap. So it doesn't matter if it's man or woman. The law should be applied equally. And if it's the woman who commits the crime, then she should pay the time, just like men do when they commit the crime, like men should.
In a case of civil act, or in a case of revenge porn alleged like this, I mean, what type of civil case could play out if she's found guilty of spreading these nude photographs?
So it's hard because, we always come to the question of damages. In civil cases, there's causation, there's damages. And to make it simple, let's take a car wreck. Somebody hits your car and they cause the wreck. Okay, you got them proven to be the guilty or the liable party. But then what are your damages? You can prove usually in a car wreck a broken arm. It cost me this much to repair and this much to go to the doctor. But in this case, what was the harm is first question. How much harm did it cause this victim? And then number two, can they really collect it anyway? Does this woman, the defendant, have the money to pay any possible lawsuit? That's what I would ask if I was the lawyer for the victim. I'd say, number one, what were your damages? Number two, if we win, can we collect it? And number three, in this kind of case, I'd say, this might be bringing more exposure to the situation. The fact that you had nude pictures shared online, now you're going to bring a lawsuit about it. Now you're going to have more people looking up those pictures online. Is that what you really want? Because like the Hippocratic Oath for doctors says, first, do no harm. So she may not get sued in a civil way for it, or she may. It just depends on the victim's feelings, how angry the victim is, how much revenge the victim wants for the sharing of her pictures online.
When it comes to calculating damages, because, using the car reference, if I get into a car wreck and then, the person who's responsible, I end up getting a new car, and if I'm injured, I end up getting, help with my medical bills, I would assume. In the case of the internet, I mean, once a picture's out there, you never really know, where it's potentially going to be. And that picture 5 years from now could surface and it's still tied to the person who spread it initially. How does that factor into determining what damages could be in a civil case?
See, I always knew you'd make a good personal injury lawyer. That's the argument.
You can see me in the commercials and like on the side of a bus. Yeah,
see
I look
that?
like an advertise. Yeah,
Better call Chris. So,
that's right.
But that's exactly the argument. I remember the first time in law school that I heard an argument like that where the professor said, "How much is a lost arm worth?" What do you mean, how much? How do you do math like that? But that's the math that personal injury lawyers have to do. And that's the math you were talking about. How do you calculate? And the question, I think, has to be put like this to a jury. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, how much would it be worth to you to not have a nude picture of yourself on the internet indefinitely? And then the numbers start to increase, but you're right. There's no real calculation for what is the value of a nude picture of yourself being out there. And look, some people could argue she was beautiful. There's, less harm to her than someone who's really upset about the way their body looks. And people could take it the other way and say, but that's supposed to be private. So it's a hard calculation. I don't know the answer, but it's worth something. And then the other argument, of course, is what's it worth to make it so that the defendant knows she did wrong and doesn't ever do this again. It's got to hurt her pocketbook.
Yeah, no, we'll see how this case plays out. She's innocent until proven guilty on both fronts, but an interesting case to watch out of South Florida. Randy Kessler, always great to have you on Law and Crime. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.